Today we are going to look at how to convert statements into questions. Now let's start with what is a statement. A statement is a sentence that supplies information. For example, today is Saturday, the sky is blue. These two sentences supply information to you. It doesn't require an answer from you. We are going to convert or change these statements into questions. In other words, we're going to change them into a sentence that requires an answer from you. We're going to change them into a question. There are various ways we can do this. So we're going to start off by looking at the first type of statement that we can get, that we have to then convert or change into. Sometimes we are going to get a statement that is going to contain a specific answer to question words. In other words, my statement will either tell me who was doing something, or what was happening, or when did it happen, or where did it happen, or the reason for why, and also linking to that would be how. So these, they are your 5WH words that requires specific information from you. So when I have a statement that requires this specific information from you, we are going to change the statement into a question doing the following. We are always going to start with these question words, as you will see in a moment. So now we are going to convert a statement into a question using a question word. When this will be asked to you, the question word will normally be given to you. We'll look at some examples at the end of the show. So here I've given you some statements, and keep in mind that there's just not always just one answer to converting a statement into a question when we are using question words. If we look at the statement, he kicked the bucket, I can answer two specific pieces of information from this statement. I can ask who kicked the bucket. I can also ask what was kicked. If we look at the statement, the rain falls lightly on the rooftop, I can ask what is falling lightly on the rooftop. I can also ask how does the rain fall. So it's important that when you have to convert a statement into a question, that you will be given the question word so that you know what it is they are looking for. Something else that I need to point out to you here specifically is the verb. It is very important that when I convert my statement into a question, my verb has to stay in the same tense. I cannot change the tense of my verb when I convert a statement into a question. It has to stay in the same tense. So here you will see my verb is he kicked the bucket. That's in the simple past tense. So when I convert that into a question, it must stay in my simple past tense, kicked, that ed. What was kicked? There you see, my was is my auxiliary verb that I use for the simple past tense, and I stay in my simple past tense, was kicked. Here, the rain falls lightly on the rooftops. I am in my simple present tense. When I convert it into a question form, my tense stays the same. What falls lightly on the rooftop? Or how does the rain fall? Don't worry too much about do, does, and did. We will look at that in a second. But what's important here is that you must remember to stay in the same tense as the given. Now, Sometimes my statement is not going to answer a question word, for example, who, what, when, where, why, or how. Sometimes it's just going to have a simple yes, no answer. Then we cannot use question words to start my sentence or to start my question with. Therefore, we then have two options. My first option is I must check whether my statement or my sentence contains my verb to be. And then I'm going to use that verb to be to start my question when I convert my statement into a question. These are some examples of what my verb to be is. You remember my verb to be is a helping verb, also sometimes referred to as an auxiliary verb. There are many different forms of them, but today we are just going to look at my simple present and my simple past auxiliary verbs to keep things simple. So if my statement is going to contain a verb to be, I have to use that to start my question. For example, he is an excellent athlete. See, it doesn't ask anything like who, what, when, where, why. It just makes a statement, he is an excellent athlete, and it uses a form of my verb to be. Then I have to use that verb to be to start my sentence. Is he an excellent athlete? And I'm going to keep on pushing that you have to remember your question mark at the end of every question. Otherwise, you won't get your marks. It's important. Another example, Elton John was a superstar. There I have my verb to be. Now to convert my statement into a question, I have to use my verb to be to start my question. Was Elton John a superstar? Question mark. They are twins. You can see it follows the same pattern. They are twins, verb to be. Are they twins? Question mark. They were always late. Again, my verb to be. I use that to start my sentence or my question. Where were they always late? And then very importantly here, please, question mark. Now that is if my sentence contained a verb to be. What if my sentence does not contain a verb to be? It just contains a regular verb or a finite verb. How am I going to start my sentence then? Now we are going to call in the help of do, does, and did. And I'm going to use that along with my verb. But watch out, there is something important here that you have to note. We'll get to that in a moment. Now, if my sentence does not contain a verb to be, she likes dancing. That is not a verb to be, that is a finite verb. It can stand completely on its own and make sense. Then I have to call in my helping verbs. My helping verbs in the form of do, does, or did to formulate my question. So she likes dancing. I can't say likes she dancing. I have to use either do or does or did. In this case, I'm going to use does she like dancing? Question mark. Again there I'm just going to put a nice big fat question mark at the end of all my examples so that you are reminded that that is a very important punctuation mark for converting statements into questions. Let's look at some more examples. He wanted some time to rest. Again, I can't say wanted he some time to rest. I have to use do, does, or did. In this case, I'm going to use did he want some time to rest. Now let's just quickly look at two things here. First of all, we are going to look at do, does, and did, and when to use which one in the next slide. But what I want you to focus on at the moment is the following. Can you see that here my verb is in the simple present tense form? She likes dancing. But over here, my verb is in its most simple form. In my second example, my verb was in the simple past tense form. He wanted some time to rest. But when I converted that into a question, I used my verb again in its most simple form. That is very important because after do or does or did, I always have to use the most simple form of my verb because do, does, and did already shows me the tense. Let's look at another example. They walk around the house. Again, walk, it is already in its most simple form, so it can't really go much further or it can't get much simpler. But this time I start my question with do they walk around the house? Question mark, question mark, question mark. So very important. And my last important point, I just want to emphasize, always use the most simple form of my verb after I have started my question with do or does or did. Now, let's look at when do I use do, when do I use does, and when do I use did. I've compiled a table here for you to show you two important things that we have to keep in mind when I have to choose between do or does or did is first of all my subject. Whether my subject is singular, in other words, there's only one person doing the work, or whether my subject is plural, then I will have more than one person doing the work. The second thing that I have to keep into consideration is my tense, whether I'm in the present tense or whether I'm in the past tense. When my verb is singular, for example, the boy walks home, and my verb walks is in the simple present tense, then I am going to use does. So for a singular subject in the simple present tense, I use does. Does the boy, only one boy, therefore does. Does the boy walk home? Question mark. Now if I take that same sentence and I change my subject into its plural form, for example, the boys. The boys walk home. Now I have to use the plural form of my auxiliary verb, do. Do the boys walk home? That is when my sentence has a plural subject in the simple present tense. What happens when my tense is in the past? That's actually very easy because as you can see, now it doesn't matter whether my subject, boy, is singular or whether my subject, boys, is plural. I'm always going to use did. So did I always use for when I want to show that my sentence was in the past tense. For example, the boy walked home. When I convert that statement into a question, it turns into did the boy walk home? And there again you can see I am using the most simple form of my verb. Just to give you an example of when my subject is plural, the boys, more than one, walked home. Walked is in the past tense. Now I convert that statement into a question, and that turns into did to show that I am in my past tense. The boys walk, again the most simple form of my verb, home. So that's when I know when to use do or did. Now we are just quickly going to have a look at some typical test type questions, and we are going to start with statements that gives me specific information or answers specific question words. Here I've shown you how this may be asked to you in a test. I'm going to give you the statement, Tracy walked her dog, and I'm going to supply you with a question word, and then I'm going to give you the question, turn the following statement into questions by using the question words provided in brackets. Tracy walked her dog. I like ice cream, and here I want you to start with what? I am going to the shop. Here I want you to start with where. I will meet you there at 3 o'clock. Then I want you to start with when. And I slammed the door because I was annoyed. And there I want you to start with why. Let's quickly have a look at what happens to these statements when I start them with questions. So now we are looking at our memo for turning statements that contain specific information that answers my question words, who, what, where, when, why, into questions. And the big thing that I have to remember here is that I must stay in my same tense always as the given statement. So please make a note of that. You have to stay in your same tense. My first statement was Tracy walked the dog. And the question word that you had to use was who. So there you can see I always started with my question word. Tracy walked the dog. Who walked her dog? Question mark. So I stayed in the same tense. The second statement was I like ice cream. And you had to start with what? What do I like? There you can see again I stayed in the same tense and I used my question mark. Number 3, the statement was I am going to the shop. And I asked you to start with where. Where am I going? You see, I was in my simple continuous tense and I stayed in there. Number 4, I'll meet you at 3 o'clock. This time I wanted you to start with when. When will I meet you? There you will see I did not change the tense of my verb. And your last statement was, I slammed the door because I was annoyed. And I wanted you to answer why. Why did I slam the door? Watch out here. My did shows me I am in my past tense, and remember always after do, does and did I have to use my most simple form of my verb. So did slam is still in my simple past tense. I'm not going to say why did I slammed the door. That is incorrect. So that is the first type of question you can expect when I give you a question word and you have to convert that statement into a question using the question word. Important, stay in the same. Another typical test question that you can expect is if I give you a statement that contains an example of my verb to be. She is a lucky girl. The dog was bored at home. They are always naughty. The boys were sad. I am always hungry. Remember, now I have to start my question with my verb to be. That is what I have to do. So let's have a look at what is happening when I convert my statement into a question when my statement contains an example of the verb to be. I have to start with my verb to be. So my first statement was, she is a lucky girl. Therefore, I have to start with my verb to be. Is she a lucky girl? And I'm just going to put another big fat question mark here at the side so that you can always remember to insert that very important punctuation mark. My second statement was the dog was bored at home. So now I have to start with my verb to be. Was the dog bored at home? Question mark. My third statement was they are always naughty. There is my example. Are they always naughty? Question mark. Number 4, the boys were sad. Were the boys sad? Question mark. And my last statement was, I am always hungry. Then I have to start with, am I always hungry? You will see it's very simple because you simply start with the verb to be that was provided. Let's look at a last set of questions that you might expect. In my last set of questions, my statement may contain what we call a finite verb or a verb that can stand completely on its own. And then I cannot start my sentence with once she a cookie or once she a chocolate cake. I have to call in the help of my auxiliary verbs do or does or did. And remember, here it depends on whether I have a singular subject or a plural subject when I have to pick between these, and it is also going to depend on my tense, whether I'm going to use do or does or did. So here are my statements. She wants a chocolate cake. Kara hated wasted time. John exercised at home. They walked around the house 20 times. They bake a cake. You will see that these finite verbs are in different tenses. That one is in my simple past, simple past, simple past. Once and bake is in my simple present. Remember, we said tense is going to play a role when I have to choose between do, does, and did. And I also used different subjects. Here I have a singular subject. Kara is a singular subject and John is also a singular subject, but they are both plural subjects. So let's look at what happens to these statements when I have to change them into questions. Right, something that I have to hammer on just here again is after do, does, and did, I always have to use the most simple form of my verb, because remember, do, does, and did then already shows me my tense of my verb. So I cannot say, did John exercised at home? I already showed that I'm in my past tense by using did. But let's quickly take it from the top. And two things that I want to highlight is firstly that I use my different forms of do, does, and did depending on my subject, whether that was singular or plural. And then secondly, I just want to highlight that I'm always using the most simple form of my verb here. So let's concentrate on my subject here. In this case, she. My statement was, she wants a chocolate cake. Now I have to start with do, does, and did. My subject, who is the person that wanted a chocolate cake? It was she. She was singular, and my question was in its simple present tense. Therefore, I'm going to use does. Does she, and then my most simple form of my verb, want a chocolate cake? My second statement was, Kara hated wasted time. In this case, my verb was in the past tense. Then I immediately go to my past tense form of my auxiliary verb did. And luckily then, it doesn't matter whether my subject is singular, did Cara hate wasted time, did John exercise at home, or whether my subject is plural, as in the fourth example, did they walk around the house 20 times. So past tense is actually quite easy because I'm always going to use did to start a question. Just note, did Cara hate wasted time? Not did Cara hated wasted time? Always the most simple form of my verb after do. Does or did. My third statement was John exercised at home. Now my subject is singular, but my verb was in the past tense, so it doesn't really matter. I'm always going to start my sentence with did then. Did John exercise, the most simple form of my verb, at home? My fourth statement was they walked around the house 20 times. In this case, I'm going to again use did because my sentence was in the past tense, walked. Doesn't matter that my subject is plural because I'm always going to use did in the past tense, but again important, my most simple form of my verb after I've used do, does or did. And my last example, the statement was they bake a cake. In this case, my subject is plural. Then I'm going to use do because my verb was also in the simple present tense. Now I must pick between does or do. And because my subject is plural, I'm going to use do. And then lastly, just to drive that point home, is I always use the most simple form of my verb. Do they bake a cake? And that is how you change statements into questions in 3 different ways.